I think these days we can sit and dress it up and there be some fancy word or theme that tells you that he studied to understand how people think, and he didn't. He was just a really good bloke.
This is Managers at Home, episode 4, and I'm delighted to be joined by the Leyton Orient manager, Ross Embleton. Ross, firstly, how are you and your family?
Yeah, we're good. I think, like a lot of other people in a very similar state of mind at the moment, it's getting to a stage now where all the new ideas, initiatives and things to try are, becoming a little bit normal. And trying to look for a little bit of a light at the end of the tunnel, I suppose. So, but everyone's well, everyone's safe. So, that's got to be the priority for now.
Obviously, it's been a crazy year, but how have you found your first taste of management?
I'm probably as difficult as it has been. And I had a bit of a running joke with director of football the other day and said to him, like, if I ever go on to win anything or achieve something as a manager, I'm not sure it'll make the book at the moment because of the amount of scenarios we've been faced with this year. But I think because of how rough and tough it is for all managers, but the circumstances in which I came into the job off the back of losing Justin, and then the changes in management that we've gone through throughout the year, and now this, I feel like it can't get much harder, and I feel like I can embrace some of the challenges that are out there. And when the tough times do really come for me, whenever they come within my career, I'm going to be able to look back on what has been an extremely tough grounding. And probably with that in mind, with the interim periods that I had in charge in the role, and probably in a mindset of, don't want to sound sort of too flippant about it, but almost it wasn't really something, I didn't have the head coach manager target at the end of that journey. It was about me just doing what was right for the club and for me and the players at the time. So probably selfishly looking back, it was a nice way for me to be eased into becoming the full-time head coach. I think there's always obstacles going into a role when you've been working with a group of players in a different role within that club already. But I feel that the way it's been very, very up and down in that period of time, it really gave me the opportunity to be prepared to come into it full time. And now I'm in it full time, and certainly since Christmas, results have got better. I think some of that is down to clarity for the players and the staff. And then also from a personal perspective, I think I've become a little bit more focused on what the job is actually all about, and just how serious it is that I'm in it on a full-time basis. And we've sort of found a little bit of an identity and a little bit of a direction, and results have reflected that, certainly since the turn of the year.
You had academy roles at Spurs, Bournemouth and Norwich. And so, who's the best players you've coached?
It's a funny one, really. I think my role at Spurs was more sort of an overseeing of age groups rather than actually coaching. But I think when I look back on the two players that probably really jump out at me, Harry Kane was there at the time, and you could see he had a real drive to be the very best that he could be, whatever that was going to be. I'm not going to sit here and say, I knew he was going to get to where he was going to get to, but his desire to work and practice and improve was something that always stood out. But I can't say that I had any influence or that I was around that sort of environment. The best players of a young age that I really remember were Harry Winks. Always had something about him. Really nice kid. Just did things right, did things properly. His standards were always of a real high standard, even as a young lad. And then the other one at Spurs that really jumped out that most people, I'm sure, will be aware of, that hasn't really gone on to the levels that we all quite expected, was Marcus Edwards. He was a winger, number 10, sort of very Messi-like in terms of the way he carried the ball and went past people. While I was at Bournemouth, we had a lad who was still at school. I was taking the youth team, and he was still at school but played every week for the youth team. His name was Sam Matthews. Sam suffered a few injuries and he's been at Bristol Rovers this year. Had some loan spells in the National League and stuff like that. So again, hasn't probably quite hit the heights that we were all expecting of him, but some of the things that the boy could do in terms of, again, a little bit like Marcus, the way he carried the ball, the way manipulated the ball, moved his body, went past people, excited you, got you off your seat a little bit. Was something a little bit different. And while I was at Norwich, the one who always stood out without actually really having the real glowing references all the time from coaches and the people at the club was Todd Cantwell. I remember Dimitri, the coach at the time for the under-16s, constantly used to go on to me about how clever he was, how bright he was. Physically, he hadn't quite got there yet, but he was really excited about the way that he took up positive positions, the passes that he played, how creative he could be. So he was one from Norwich that really stood out. And obviously for him, he's gone on to have the start of what looks like a fantastic career.
Tragically, in June, we lost Justin Edinburgh. As a manager, what were his key strengths, and what have you sort of learned from him that you've taken into your own management style?
I always grew up working in a community scheme, working on grassroots football, where you want kids to love playing football and coming back to play football. I always felt that the way you treated the kids, treated the parents, treated the people that you were working with was such a key element, but didn't probably realise how much it transferred to things later on in life. And when I come into contact with Just, I had a real image of him as being this 90s footballer that he was. Big personality, big aura, big presence when he came into room, and he had all of those things. And I think that really gave him, he had a lot of self-belief. And even if you looked at him and he looked nervous or edgy, he had this way of portraying confidence in himself and what he was about. But underneath it, there was a lot more sympathy towards people. There was a lot more feeling. And what he showed me was that you don't have to be this, this big, strong personality all the time. You can have more feel with your staff and your players and the environment that you create. Then, of course, he had that definition that when he needed to step over that line or needed to be authoritative or show some discipline and strength, then he had that in an abundance. But I just look at the way that he treated me and the staff. He gave us real opportunity to go and get on with the role. He didn't stand over you wanting answers, wanting to know why you're doing this, how you're doing that. He trusted us, which I think we have to sort of take some credit for at times, but he had full trust in us to go and do the job, and he was comfortable in himself and comfortable with the people around him, although he didn't know us particularly well, to allow us the freedom to go and do our jobs. And then I think with the way that he was with the players every day, again, comes back to those people skills. And I think these days we can sit and dress it up and there be some fancy word or theme that tells you that he studied to understand how people think, and he didn't. He was just a really good bloke, and that's all. Since the sad loss that his family and obviously secondary, but we all suffered. That's always been the thing that's reassured me, is what a great geezer he was. He was a proper man. He told you how it was, but underneath it, he had real sympathy towards you and the way that you were. Although he didn't always have that, he'd hammer you in front of people, and he was like it with everybody. When the time was right or a message or a conversation needed to be had, he was very sincere in the way that he did it, and a massive family man. And I think all of those things really came together and obviously allowed us to get the success. But I think bigger than that, it gave us all that massive feeling that we had towards him, but as a group together.
And moving on to sort of working with Cole Fletcher, how was it like working with him, and what were you thinking sort of before, during and after he was sacked?
Cole's a really nice guy. He obviously came into the club off the back of us having a very, very tough time in terms of obviously the loss of Justin. So that was always going to be difficult. And I think, to be honest, it was the reason why I stepped into the role, because we wanted to get the club to a position where we felt it was the right time, if that's the right phrase, for someone new to come in, for someone to have come in immediately. It just wouldn't have been fair on that person. So when he came in, he had some fantastic ideas in terms of the way that he wanted the team to play. what he wanted to in terms of the development of players and the way that he wanted to work. And I think if you asked him, we both got on fine. I think what is always tough when you come into a new environment, especially with existing staff, and probably what Just did really well when he came in the same situation, was Carl was very keen to get his own ideas over very, very quickly. So there was a lot of time where, rightly so, he was the manager, he was the head coach, he was delivering, and it was about us trying to get up to speed as quickly as we could, or as quickly as he wanted us to, in terms of understanding exactly what he wanted from the players and what he wanted from the team. But it just became very, very difficult. Obviously, results weren't great. And I think across the club, it became the feeling around the training ground and in and amongst the environment, it just wasn't the right match, and it hadn't quite clicked. And I know some people will sit there and say that it was a very, very short period of time, and it was. And I think for Carl, we'd probably feel, very hard done by. But I suppose the flip side of that, and being an employee of the club, is if people that pay your wages, people that make the big decisions at a club don't feel something's right. I think sometimes we have to acknowledge that they've been brave enough to make a decision, and it makes it very, very tough for him. It's one thing that's said all along throughout it is it's very, very sad that somebody's lost their job. You don't wish that on anybody, and like I say, he was a good man, and you could see his intentions appeared to be the right ones, but for whatever reason, I think that the coming together of different things just wasn't the right match,
The Athletic have reported that apparently League Two and League One is set to be cancelled. They said they're going to decide it by a weighted points per game system. If that's true, what do you make of that decision?
I think it's a sensible one. I think if someone had mentioned it to me sort of 10 days, 2 weeks ago, I'd have still held out hope that we were gonna get back out there and play. But I think it's the sensible option. You again, just touching on some of those people's families that we've got at our club, it makes it really, really difficult for people to go back into that environment, having contact with other people. We're not going to have the luxury of what's being discussed at the very, very top of the game, of people going into hotels or be hidden away to get the games done. That's not going to be a possibility for us. So I think the sensible decision will be and probably should be to bring it to a close. I think the points per game is probably the most simple way to do that. From our perspective, we're not in a position of vulnerability or looking above us to try to get into playoff positions and stuff like that. So we don't have that real burden of a decision. I think ultimately, from my point of view and a selfish perspective, we'd love to go back. If we were given the choice, going back would be the one that we would take, because having another 10 games of almost, probably use it as a bit of a trial period between now and the end of the season, because we haven't got anything either way for us to play for, would have been a great opportunity for us to really finish the season in a positive manner, but at the same time with a few new ideas. But again, we have to maintain that as much as we want football back, the forefront of it all has got to be people's safety and people staying safe.
Absolutely.
I do think that's what's going to happen. I can't see another alternative at the moment.
All right, last question we ask all the managers. If you had to be isolated with 3 managers, past or present, who would they be and why?
Pep, definitely. I just look at what he's done at Barca, and then obviously what he did at Bayern, but then how he's brought into English football, his enthusiasm, his energy on all or nothing stuff is just, I just have to have him. Sir Alex Ferguson, because of everything, and I think that there's still such a massive place for the way that he carried himself, that manager attitude. There's so many of us head coaches now that are around that embrace so many different parts of the role, but I still do think that there's a massive amount of those elements that he had as a character, and the way that he evolved his teams just can never be forgotten. And I'm sure I know he likes a glass of red wine, so that would be a great contribution as well. And the last one, I'd have to go Sir Alf Ramsey, because imagine being able to sit there and say you won the World Cup with England in England. Imagine having that. Not a bad CV thing to have on your CV, but at the same time, when I look back and think about what Euro '96 was like, if we won the World Cup, to be able to say you were the England manager would be mind-blowing.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Ross.
No problem.
We wish you and your family all the best and hope to be seeing Leyton Orient playing again.
Likewise, mate. Take care of yourself.